لا إله إلا الله محمد رسول الله لا إله إلا الله محمد رسول الله لا إله إلا الله محمد رسول الله لا إله إلا الله محمد رسول الله.
Many of history's turning points arrive without a celebration. They often arrive looking smaller than expected, appearing first as a moment of deep frustration. Before this day was remembered as a triumph, those who lived it saw only a humiliating defeat. In 628 CE, 1,400 people began a march across the Arabian desert toward Mecca. They were not an army. They traveled unarmed and wore the simple white garments of pilgrims. Their goal was the performance of Umrah, a peaceful return to a city that had once cast them out. The Kaaba represented more than a destination. It was the direction of their prayers and the center of their memory. After years of exile, the pull toward the sacred house was an intense physical ache that drove them across the heat of the sands. By arriving without armor or weapons, the believers tested a singular idea: whether pure spiritual devotion could survive a return to a hostile landscape. As the pilgrims neared the sanctuary, the Quraysh leaders in Makkah responded with suspicion. Driven by their own pride and the fear of looking weak, they dispatched riders to block the road, flatly refusing to let the Muslims pass. The procession came to a halt at the edge of Hudaybiyyah, a desolate stretch of rocky land. The anticipation of the journey was replaced by a heavy, waiting silence. The pilgrims were now stuck in a geographical dead end, far from home and barred from their goal. There is a specific pain in being agonizingly close to a beloved destination and being made to stop. The believers sat within reach of the sanctuary, held back by an opposition that had no moral right to deny their worship. The community now faced an internal crisis. They possessed the strength to answer this provocation with force, but the moment demanded a different kind of resolve: the ability to suppress the instinct for battle in the face of an unjust blockade. Days passed in the heat. The standoff was managed not for combat, but through a slow, breathless cycle of envoys and negotiations. Words moved across the sand where swords did not. When the treaty was finally drafted, the primary condition felt like a betrayal. The believers were ordered to turn around and return to Medina immediately. They would not be permitted to enter Mecca at all that year. The other clauses favored Mecca's political optics. Muslims had to return defectors who fled to them, while the Quraysh were under no obligation to return Muslims who fled to Mecca. To the men, the document looked like total surrender. The agreement appeared to be a regression. It seemed to sacrifice their spiritual rights and ignore the growing strength they had spent years building. Confusion and disappointment rippled through the camp as the terms were finalized. These were people who had sacrificed everything for their faith, and now they were being told to walk away from the very threshold of the Kaaba. Prophet Muhammad stood apart from this frustration. His acceptance of the terms was an exercise in restraint over impulse. He chose to follow a direction that the people around him could not yet see, prioritizing the command of revelation over the demands of the ego. The retreat was a heavy process. The believers packed their belongings and turned their backs on the city. Their longing remained unresolved as they began the long march back into the desert. This departure required a difficult form of internal discipline. It was the choice to trust in a divine timing that felt entirely at odds with the immediate, painful reality. As they traveled, a new revelation descended that corrected the human reading of the event. Despite the feelings of the camp, the message explicitly labeled this retreat as a clear victory. With the treaty signed, the constant threat of war suddenly vanished. For the first time, the borders between the two groups were open. When the swords were put away, people from across the region were finally able to sit, talk, and observe the Muslims without the pressure of an active conflict. In the 2 years of peace that followed, more people entered the faith than in the previous 2 decades. The space created by the treaty allowed ideas to travel further and faster than any battle ever could. The retreat had actually been an opening. Hudaybiyyah remains a study in perspective. It demonstrates that a moment which bruises the expectation can still be the foundation of a greater opening. It reminds us that when the road bends in a direction we do not understand, victory may already be unfolding in the form of restraint.
Muhammadur Rasulullah. La ilaha illallah. Muhammadur Rasulullah. La ilaha illallah. Muhammadur Rasulullah. La ilaha illallah. Muhammadur Rasulullah.